Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be tackling a subject today that I think a lot of you can relate to,
Yeah.
myself included.
Hmm?
Navigating singlehood as a Christian.
It's a big one.
You know that feeling
Yeah.
when everybody around you seems to be finding the
Oh,
one,
yeah.
getting
Yeah.
married,
Yeah.
and you're like,
Yeah.
is God ever going to write my love story?
It can feel a little bit
Yeah,
like you're stuck in a waiting room sometimes.
totally. And so that's why we're diving deep today into this podcast episode called Are You Waiting or Trusting?
Yeah.
Finding Love as a Single Christian.
I love that title.
I know, it's so good, right?
Yeah.
It really resonated with me because it tackles that very tension.
Yeah.
Like, are we passively waiting,
Mm-hmm.
or is there something more we should be doing during this season?
I think what's great about this episode is it kind of encourages us to really look inward
Yeah,
and ask ourselves some tough questions.
totally. And one of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea that God is the author of love,
Mhm.
which sounds really nice.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean for us single folks?
I think it's easy to get caught up in the world's definition of love,
Right.
which, we see all the time,
Yeah.
all around us, which is
Totally.
very much focused on like romantic feelings,
Mhm.
the perfect partner.
Yeah.
But when we understand that God is actually the source of love,
Okay.
it really changes our perspective.
So instead of frantically searching for someone to, like, complete us,
Right.
we should be seeking God's guidance in our relationships.
Exactly. And the episode actually connects this to Psalm 127.1,
Okay.
which says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain."
I love that verse.
It's so good.
Especially in this context,
Yeah.
it really makes you think about what it means to build a house.
Right.
Like, what are the foundations we're laying here?
Yeah. Are we building on,
Yeah.
fleeting feelings, or are we building on something much more substantial?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that a truly fulfilling relationship isn't something we can force or manufacture.
Right.
It's a work of God.
It is.
It's a partnership built on shared values and His guidance. Oh, man, that makes me think of all the times I've prayed.
Yeah.
God, is this the one?
Oh, yeah.
About practically every new person I met.
Oh, totally.
Like, maybe if I just kept asking, you would
Wow.
finally point to someone and say, yep, that's him.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
But the episode actually talks about this.
Okay.
It points out the difference between discernment and desperation.
Okay, help me out here.
Yeah,
Because I've definitely blurred those lines sometimes.
totally.
What separates healthy discernment from desperation?
I think discernment comes from a place of peace and trust in God's timing.
Okay.
It involves seeking his guidance through prayer, wise counsel,
Okay.
and really, honestly, evaluating if the person aligns with your values and particularly with your faith.
So it's less about analyzing every little interaction
Yeah,
for signs and more about inviting God into the process.
absolutely.
Got it.
And desperation, I think, on the other hand,
Yeah.
often leads to trying to force relationships that aren't meant to be,
Oh, yeah.
ignoring red flags,
Mm-hmm.
and settling for less than God's best for us.
And that reminds me of another point the episode makes.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be seeing potential partners everywhere.
Right.
I can laugh about it now.
Yeah.
But there was a time when every guy at church was a potential candidate
Oh my God.
for my future husband.
Totally.
It's so relatable. I know, right?
Yeah.
And this is where Isaiah 55.8 comes into play,
Yes.
reminding us that God's thoughts and ways are higher than ours.
Mm-hmm.
We might think we have it all figured out,
Yeah.
but His plan for our lives,
Yeah.
including our love lives,
Yes.
is often far greater than we can imagine.
Absolutely.
So instead of approaching every interaction,
Mm.
like a job interview for the role of my future spouse,
Uh,
we should be focusing on building genuine connections and trusting that God will lead us to the right person
yeah.
at the right time.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great takeaway. It is. Just enjoy getting to know people,
Yeah.
learning from them, growing in our own faith journey.
Which actually ties into a point I found super encouraging.
Yeah.
The episode talks about how this season of singleness,
Mm-hmm.
while often viewed as a waiting period,
Right.
can actually be a time of incredible preparation and growth.
It doesn't have to be just biding time
Right.
until you find that person.
Exactly.
It's really about becoming the best version of yourself
Yeah.
so that when the time is right,
Yeah.
you're ready for a healthy and fulfilling relationship.
This really resonated with me because I've often struggled with feeling like being single is somehow a punishment. Like I'm missing out on something essential.
I think so many people feel that way.
Yeah.
But the episode reframes it as like this gift, an opportunity to really focus on your relationship with God and pursue your passions without distraction.
I love that perspective. And it even connects this idea to 1 Corinthians 7.34.
Yeah.
Which talks about how being single can free us up to serve God with undivided attention.
Right.
Which is so powerful.
Yeah.
Instead of viewing this season as a void, we can see it as a time to deepen our relationship with God.
Yeah.
Invest in personal growth. And serve others in ways that might be challenging in a relationship.
It's about using this time wisely.
Yeah.
Right. And really making the most of it.
Totally.
Because God is using this time to shape you and prepare you for what's to come.
Okay, so we've talked about trusting God's timing, embracing the growth opportunities of singlehood.
Yeah.
But the episode doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
It also dives into the motivations behind our desire for a relationship.
It's getting deep.
And that's where things get even more interesting.
I think so.
What do you think?
I think it's important to be honest with ourselves about why we want a relationship.
Yeah.
Are we seeking it for the right reasons? Or are we letting societal pressure or even our own insecurities dictate our desires?
That's a great point. And speaking of tough questions, the episode asks a very direct one. Has you ever put a deadline on God?
I have.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I've definitely been guilty of that.
It's so easy to do.
I've had those moments where I'm like, okay, God.
Yeah.
I've been patient. I've been trusting. But by, fill in the blank age.
Right.
I expect to be married.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, come on. I put in my time.
I think we've all done that at some point.
But the episode wisely points out that when we try to set deadlines for God, we're essentially saying, I know bigger than you, and I'm not going to trust your timing.
It can be a bit arrogant when you think about it that way. Which, let's be honest, is a pretty arrogant stance to take.
It is.
It is.
And it often stems from a place of fear, insecurity, lack of trust in God's goodness.
So how do we move from that place of demanding a timeline to truly surrendering our desires to God?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because I think a lot of people listening might be feeling that tension right now.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that?
Well, the episode actually suggests something incredibly practical,
okay,
but also incredibly powerful.
What's that?
Prayer.
Okay.
But not just the God, please send me a spouse kind of prayer.
Right.
But a prayer of surrender. Where we really lay our desires at his feet and ask him to align our hearts with his will.
It's about acknowledging that we might not have it all figured out.
Right.
And that God's plan for our lives is far greater than our own limited perspective.
It's about saying, God, I trust you.
Yeah.
I believe you have my best interests at heart. Show me what you're doing in this season.
Yeah.
And help me to be content in your will.
That's such a beautiful way to approach this whole journey. But I'm curious, where does the episode go from there?
Oh, there's so much more.
Because I know we've still got a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Including some really insightful and practical advice on thriving in this season.
Yes.
I think this is a good place to pause for a moment and let everything we've discussed sink in.
Yeah.
What resonates with you so far?
Yeah.
What challenges your thinking?
Yeah. What are your takeaways?
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive.
Yes.
And explore some practical tips for truly thriving in singlehood.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to let some of that sink in.
Me too. It's amazing how shifting our perspective from waiting to trusting can really change how we approach this whole singlehood thing.
Absolutely. And building on that idea of trust, the next part of this episode really challenged me to examine my heart's motivations.
Ooh, interesting.
It even uses Proverbs 4.23 as a sort of warning sign.
Ooh, Proverbs 4.23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Powerful stuff. But how does that apply to wanting a relationship?
I think it reminds us that our desires, even good ones, like wanting to find love, can easily become idols if we're not careful.
Right.
We start chasing the feeling of being in love, the validation of having a partner, instead of seeking God's will for our lives.
So it's not enough to just say we want a God-honoring relationship.
Yeah.
We have to actually check our motives at the door
Yeah.
and ask ourselves, am I pursuing this for the right reasons, or am I trying to fill a void in my life that only God can fill?
Exactly. And I think that's where the episode's discussion about childish behaviors really hit home for me.
Okay.
It talked about how we can sometimes try to manipulate situations or force God's hand when it comes to relationships.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I remember a time when I was convinced that if I just prayed hard enough, God would make this one specific person fall in love with me. Looking back, it's kind of embarrassing, but I think we've all done things like that at some point.
Absolutely. We try to strike deals with God, make promises we can't keep, or even resort to silly superstitions, all in the name of finding the one.
Yeah, the episode gave some pretty hilarious examples of those childish attempts,
Yeah.
like wearing a certain color to attract attention, or strategically showing up at events where you know your crush will be.
Totally.
It's funny now, but it highlights how easily we can get caught up in those desperate measures when we're not trusting God's timing.
And the episode makes this really insightful point that pain of waiting isn't necessarily a sign that God is withholding something from you. It could actually be a sign that you've stopped relying on him and are trying to take matters into your own hands.
Wow, that's a powerful thought.
Yeah, it's challenging.
So how do we break free from that cycle of desperation and get back to a place of peace and trust?
Well, the episode suggests a simple yet profound solution.
Okay.
Prayer.
Okay.
But not just any kind of prayer. It emphasizes the importance of a prayer of surrender, where we release our tight grip on our desires and ask God to purify our motivations.
This is about coming before God with open hands and a humble heart saying, God, I'm letting go of my agenda. Show me what you're doing in my life and help me to want what you want for me.
Exactly. It's about aligning our will with his recognizing that he knows us better than we know ourselves and has a plan for our lives that is far greater than anything we could dream up.
So instead of focusing on finding the one,
Yeah.
maybe we should be asking God, how are you using this season to shape me into the person I need to be, both for myself and for my future spouse?
That's a fantastic way to reframe it because ultimately this season of singleness isn't just about finding a partner.
Right.
It's about becoming the right person for the right partner.
I love how this episode shifts the focus from passively waiting to actively preparing.
Yeah.
It challenges us to view this season not as a punishment, but as a time of incredible growth and purpose.
And that leads perfectly into the next section of the episode, which is all about thriving in this season.
Okay.
Not just surviving it.
I think this is where a lot of single Christians need to lean in, because the message we often hear is being single is tough, but hang in there. Your time will come.
Right.
While that's well-intentioned, it doesn't exactly inspire us to embrace this season.
Right. This episode takes a completely different approach.
Okay.
It reframes singleness as a gift, an opportunity to truly flourish regardless of our relationship status.
I like that.
Yeah.
And the episode even uses 1 Corinthians 7.34 as a springboard for this idea.
Yes.
The verse talks about how being single can allow you to serve the Lord without distraction.
Yeah.
It's not saying that marriage is a distraction,
Right.
but rather that singleness offers unique opportunities.
It definitely does. And the episode gives some practical examples of how to make the most of this time.
Okay, like what?
It talks about investing in our relationships with friends and family, getting involved in our communities, pursuing personal growth and development.
You know, sometimes we can get so focused on finding a partner that we neglect those other important areas of our lives.
Yeah, totally.
But the episode reminds us that having a fulfilling life isn't contingent on being in a relationship.
Absolutely. And it challenges us to ask ourselves, what are the things that bring me joy? What are my passions? What are the gifts and talents that God has given me? And how can I use them to serve him and others?
It's about recognizing that we are already whole and complete in Christ.
Yes.
And that our value doesn't come from having a partner.
And I think when we embrace that truth, we start to see all the amazing opportunities that this season holds.
Yeah.
It becomes less about what we're missing and more about what we can gain.
Totally.
In our relationship with God, in our personal growth, and in our service to others.
Okay, so we've talked about trusting God's timing, examining our motivations, and embracing the opportunities of singlehood.
Yeah.
But the episode doesn't end there, does it?
You're right. It goes even deeper, offering a practical tool to help us navigate this journey.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And it's something we've already touched on.
Okay.
Prayer.
Prayer, okay, but not just any prayer.
Yes.
Okay. The episode ends with a specific prayer of surrender that really resonated with me.
Me too. It starts by acknowledging God's goodness and thanking Him for His love and blessings in our lives.
Mhm.
I think that's such an important starting point
Yeah.
because it reminds us that even in our singleness, we are not lacking anything in Him.
And then it moves into a confession of those times when we've tried to take control, when we've doubted God's timing, or when we've allowed our desire for a relationship to become an idol in our hearts.
Yeah.
It's about being honest with God about our struggles
Mhm.
and asking for His forgiveness and grace.
And then it ends with this beautiful plea to align our hearts with His will,
Yeah.
to seek His desires above our own, and to trust that He is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see it.
That prayer really struck a chord with me because it's so raw and honest.
Yeah.
It captures the tension between longing for a partner and surrendering that desire to God.
I think anyone who's ever wrestled with the question of, why am I still single, can relate to that prayer.
Totally.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in this journey and that God is with us every step of the way.
You know, it's funny because the episode ends with a reference to Psalm 37.4.
Okay.
Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart.
The classic.
But it's not presented in that cheesy, just be happy and God will magically send you a spouse kind of way.
Right. It's about understanding that true delight, true satisfaction comes from our relationship with God, not from our circumstances.
So it's not about suppressing our desire for a partner.
Right.
Or pretending that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's about finding our ultimate fulfillment in God,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that He sees our longing,
Yes.
He hears our prayers,
Uh-huh.
and He is working everything out
Yeah.
according to His perfect plan and timing.
Exactly. And I think that's such a powerful message, especially for those who are feeling discouraged or impatient in their season of singleness.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, and I hope you're feeling as encouraged and challenged as I am.
Me too. It's been great.
But before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed
Yeah.
and see what stands out to you,
Yeah.
what resonated with you most, what feels challenging. We'll be back in a moment to share some final thoughts and leave you with a question to ponder. Welcome back, everyone. I don't know about you, but I feel like my brain is full.
Mine too.
I'm so glad we took that moment to pause and just
Yeah.
process everything.
It's a lot to unpack,
It is.
but good stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's important to remember there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to navigating singlehood as a Christian.
Right. Every journey is different.
Yeah.
Unique.
Exactly.
And beautiful.
Absolutely. But what I love about this podcast episode is that
It gives us such a helpful framework for approaching this season with intention and trust,
yes,
rather than just passively waiting for something to change.
it really empowers us to take ownership
Yeah.
of this season.
Totally. And to recognize that it's not just like a holding pattern.
Right.
It's a season with purpose.
Absolutely.
One of the things that really stuck with me
Yeah.
was this idea that the pain of waiting
Oh, yeah.
isn't necessarily a sign that we're doing something wrong.
Right.
It might actually be a sign that we're growing. We're
Mhm.
learning to surrender our desires to God.
Yeah.
And we're becoming the people He created us to be.
It's like refining.
Yeah,
Like gold.
totally.
It's a process.
And sometimes it's painful, but
Yeah. But it produces something beautiful.
it does. It refines us.
It does.
It reminds me of something I heard once.
Okay, what's that?
Sometimes God calms the storm.
Mm.
Other times, He lets the storm rage and calms His child.
Wow. I love that. It's not always about taking away the hard things.
Right.
It's about equipping us to walk through them
Yeah.
and knowing that He's with us in the midst of it.
I love that visual of Him calming His child.
Yeah. It's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me think about another key takeaway from this episode.
Yeah.
The importance of finding our delight in the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
not just in our circumstances.
So good.
Because if our happiness is entirely dependent on finding a partner,
Mm-hmm.
then we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah, and the podcast episode actually makes a good point about this.
Okay.
It's not about suppressing our desire for a relationship
Right.
or pretending that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from our relationship with God,
Yes.
not from our relationship status.
It was about shifting our focus from when will I find the one
Yeah.
to how can I deepen my relationship with the one who already knows and loves me perfectly.
I love that so
Me
much.
too. And I think when we make that shift,
Mm-hmm.
we open ourselves up to a whole new level of joy,
Yes.
contentment,
Mm.
regardless of our relationship status.
Regardless of our circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question,
Ooh, I like it.
inspired by everything we talked about
Okay.
today.
Okay.
It goes beyond just the podcast episode
Yeah.
and really challenges us to take action in our own lives.
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Shit me with it.
Okay, here it is.
Go. Okay.
What is one specific way you can delight yourself in the Lord today,
Mm.
regardless of whether you're single
Okay.
or in a relationship?
Powerful
It
question.
really cuts to the heart of
Mhm.
what we've been talking about.
Cool.
Finding our joy and satisfaction in God,
Yes.
not in our circumstances.
It's so easy to let our circumstances dictate how we feel,
It is.
right? But this is about something much deeper.
It is.
Yeah.
Maybe it's spending some time in prayer,
Yeah.
reflecting on His goodness,
Mm-hmm.
thanking Him for all the blessings in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's engaging in a hobby that brings you joy,
Yeah.
or simply taking a walk in nature
Mm-hmm.
and appreciating the beauty of God's creation.
Or maybe it's reaching out to a friend
Yeah,
who needs encouragement,
totally.
volunteering your time to serve
Mm.
others.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
The key is to actively seek ways to connect with God
Mm-hmm.
and experience His presence
Yes.
in your everyday life.
Love that.
Because when you do that,
Yeah.
when you cultivate that deep sense of joy and contentment in Him,
Mm-hmm.
it overflows into every area of your life,
That does.
including your relationships.
Absolutely. So beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perfect note to end on.
I agree.
So we leave you with that question to ponder.
Mm-hmm.
What is one way you can delight yourself in the Lord today?
Yeah. How are you going to put this into practice?
We'd love to hear your thoughts and how you're putting these insights into action.
Yeah. Come tell us.
Until next time, keep diving deep
Keep seeking truth,
and keep trusting that God is with you every step of the way.
whether you're single or married.
His love for you is constant and unwavering.
We'll see you next time.